Welcome to Psychology to Live By. Today we'll be discussing my podcast with Stephen Puri. And of course, joining me today on this roundtable are four very productively fluid people from Network Music. So I welcome Terry McBride, CEO, Chris Norwood, Head of Strategy, Colleen Novak, Music Manager, and Karen Mix, Director of People Operations. We're discussing Stephen Puri and Sukha, or the Sukha company. This is Stephen's website and app for entering flow more often at work. Just by way of short intro of Stephen, he's a pretty rare breed. He's been a senior executive at 2 motion picture studios, raised over 20 million in venture capital, began as a newscaster and interviewer. He's also a software engineer and has created computer-generated visual effects for 14 movies. And very notably, he produced the digital effects for Independence Day, which won the Oscar for visual effects. In addition, he founded 3 startups and, as he says, with one successful exit and 2 failures. But the Sukha company is a web-based focus app that bundles all the tools necessary to enter into a flow state and have a healthy, productive workday. Sukha is a Sanskrit word that means happiness from self-fulfillment and roughly translates to inner ease and happiness. So the idea of the app is to have all the tools in one place, activated by one button, to support this daily practice of Sukha. In this conversation with founder and CEO Stephen Puri, we cover many topics, including the epidemic of distraction and acedia, a widespread sense of dissatisfaction and restlessness. And therefore, Stephen's purpose for this app is not so much productivity increase, but increasing people's happiness and well-being. The app is a whole system of AI-informed aids, including aural landscapes, music and or sound, a smart assistant that gently prods you if you surf the internet or pick up the phone, a Pomodoro-type timer, a real-time task management system that also helps construct fewer, more practical goals, suggestions for break activities, stretches, walks, breathing, etc., and an optional live community that you can engage with. So all in all, it was a very entertaining and I think really practical discussion. And speaking of practical, my good friends from Network Music, I hope you are all well and thriving and entering flow frequently. So let us begin. Who would like to start? I found Stephen very very personable, and as it turns out, he's now collaborating with another friend of mine in the Compton School, which is the business school for creative industries. I thought they might see eye to eye, and indeed they did. All right, who would like to kick off?
I'm happy to jump in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I found it was a really, really great conversation and like a lot of things that connected, like talking about procrastination and the paralysis kind of when you're in your workday. I know I've been there many times, mostly when I'm unsure of where to begin, and then the distraction creeps in, like, well, while I think about it, I'll get this done, or I'll do this, or I'll pick up the phone, those types of things. So that really landed. But what kind of really resonated when he used the term in talking about the community when he went hub and spoke, that analogy just, I was like, yes, that like the Sukha being the hub and the sense that they needed to create a community because it was just all the people were the spokes. And so when we're talking about remote work and the importance of creating community, I just really thought that was a really great realization that they had, because although you've got these great tools at your fingertips, working alone remotely without having connection, I think just we're seeing more and more, even in our own organization, of that hub and spoke sort of um, scenario where how can we pull people, we've chosen this remote style, how can we pull people more together? So yeah, not so much of a question, but just I really found that reinforced those ideas.
Yeah, very nice. If I remember correctly, in the discussion with Stephen, the community thing was a bit of an afterthought. It wasn't a
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
the original design, and that's one of the things I really liked about what he's doing. Just before I address directly what you're saying, is that that came out of what I think he calls them members, but subscribers. Uh, they've done a lot of tweaks that come out of subscriber feedback. So it's been quite an iterative process. But yes, the hub and spoke, I think, and the community, of course, is not an arbitrary community. It's a community of people who have a shared interest in this, in being able to enter flow and working on important things. So in other words, it's a very positive and sympathetic community, right? And instantly people who sort of understand what you're trying to do. So I think that's very important. It's sort of built in that it's highly supportive. But this issue of working remote, of course, is, as you know, especially in your role, it's a quite serious one. Because people want to do it, they want to work from home, but it's not always good for them. Um, and it's not that they don't have good reasons to work from home. So how do you overcome the negative aspects, particularly that sense of isolation? And I think, well, this is one way. And I was reading a book recently, haven't finished it yet. Um, uh, Richard Davidson and Cortland Dahl. It's called Born to Flourish. Now, Richard is a neuroscientist, one of the world's most famous neuroscience scientists, the guy who originally put Tibetan monks into brain scanners. Um, and But there's a little section in the book where they talk about this issue, and they give a little case study of a guy who was, he was really getting quite depressed, and they were suggesting for this guy that he do some of the practices they suggest in this book, and one of them is consciously appreciating other people and externalizing it, saying it. So he didn't change any of the number of meetings he was in or the number of Zoom or team type calls, but he just took the opportunity. Remember, he was the one feeling lonely and isolated and unappreciated and lacking meaning. But he took the opportunity when he saw something, notable, creditable, useful, helpful, other people were doing. He would compliment them on it. He'd note it. He was quite skeptical about it, but they said, well, how's it working for you? How you doing at present? And he reluctantly agreed. And it had a huge impact because not only was he making a contribution to others, it made him feel much better. And then other people unconsciously took the cue. And so the calls became generally much more of a community like we're seeing here that Stephen has created around Sukha. That and the reason for being for that community, as we saw, was that people felt a great need for it. So we're seeing this intersection now of what science is telling us about human connection, and the evolving nature of work, especially working from home. It's not just a question of doing what you and I are doing here, communicating across, in this case, Zoom, but it's also deliberately engaging with people in these ways, like with pro-social ways and with kindness and generosity, and making it explicit. I think you've got to do it even more so when you're online because we
Absolutely. Yeah.
we're absent all of the other incidental touches on the shoulder or the handshakes
The
or
impromptu drop in or whatever. Yeah, it has to be way
yeah,
more intentional.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it has to be sort of designed in this way, I think. I mean, we're such a pivotal moment historically, aren't we, with AI? I think this is going to accelerate this. We'll all be working from home, and so we got to design it as well in line with what we know from neuroscience and psychology. Now, the other thing you mentioned, of course, was the procrastination piece,
Mm.
and that's a whole topic in itself, of course. But there's quite a lot of, in some ways, there's nothing new about what Stephen um, is basing this on. What was the word that you used and he used? Paralysis, was
Paralysis.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, when's a person get paralyzed? Well, when they're fearful. When
Exactly. And that's, I
when
find, approaching something that I'm like, okay, I got to figure out what this is and how it works. And that's immediately when the paralysis comes in.
yeah, exactly. And we suddenly find our phone very interesting or the refrigerator, right? And yeah, so um, this system, this Sukha system, uh, uh, provides direct assistance in breaking things down, and it will tell you if your goals are too waffly and too, like the example he gave is write your book. No, it will break it down to in this time slot, write an outline for a chapter, um, because the size of the task, especially the non-defined nature of the task, intimidates the mind,
Hmm.
and so it's very that's the other feature here. I think that it's all in one package. So you've got a task manager, you've got music and the soundscapes. You have this AI assistant who's monitoring whether you're jumping on the internet or on your phone. When you have programmed in, I don't want to be doing that, and you have this community. I think I probably missed one thing. I can't remember what the other element is, but the idea is it's all in one. And a pivotal part is to not procrastinate, to be able to sort of enter flow. But anyway, so that's probably all I've got to say in response to what you have raised, but which leaves three other
I'll go,
fluid characters.
I'll go next. So first off, I don't think I've heard you drop so many F-bombs in a podcast.
Is it right? I didn't even notice.
Second, I had to, of course, watch it for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and then watch the next 25 minutes. So you really need to make these things exactly 50 minutes, not 54 minutes.
Yeah. I'll
But
I'll take that under advisement.
but the most interesting thing to me that was said, besides some interesting facts, like he met his wife at yoga, which is similar to my own story,
Yeah.
is that as distractors, the biggest distractor is us.
Yeah.
And I found that to be utterly fascinating because that, along with, procrastinating, is probably two of the biggest barriers to getting into any sort of flow.
Yeah.
Right. And then I love the fact that don't have 80 things on your list, just the top three.
Just the top three. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that whole thing about us being our biggest distractors, that in itself is such a huge topic, right?
it is, and it sort of gets overlooked, for good reasons. It's obvious that our digital universe is largely designed around distracting us, colonizing our attention. And so, of course, it's natural to say, well, I'm distracted because of these external factors. And that's true. But people have been distracted and procrastinating long before the digital revolution, right? It's a bit of the nature of the mind that hasn't been trained in a way. So for example, the whole meditative project is to reduce distraction in the mind. And another way of understanding that is self-distraction is basically another way of describing daydreaming, mind wandering, where we're not present. We're off wandering. And that is very much a part of the way we are designed, right? And that is why, the social media companies, etc., hire psychologists and hire people from the gambling industry and hire, neuroscientists to plug into that very distractibility. Yeah, and so I think I made that point in our discussion because the other side of this is you can't just have tools for productivity if you're not calm internally. That you won't get much purchase with it, right? And so that's interesting too. I mean, obviously, what he's called this whole program Sukha, which is this inner state of relative calm and satisfaction. It's not just a matter of how productive you are. As you said, Terry, there's this, arbitrary, but the Pomodoro technique's 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Pomodoro, of course, being the Italian word for tomato, and it refers to a famous mechanical timer that was in the shape of a tomato. So, but the 5 minutes off is crucial, right? And it's to reset the system and let it rest, and let the brain rest and clear out waste products, do some stretches, do a meditation, walk around the garden. That it's about quietening the mind again. And then the mind is less distractible again, right? But if we keep stimulating the mind, it gets tired and then it becomes easily distracted. Yeah, so I think self-distraction is a whole topic in itself, but I think it's a subset of mindfulness. The more mindful we are, the less distracted, right? Or more precisely, the quicker we notice when we are distracted and bring our mind back to task. All right, so there's a lot of misconceptions about what meditation is and isn't, and the main misconception is that it's having a completely undistracted, empty mind. No, it's noticing more quickly when one is not present, and doing that at maybe 100 times an hour, and just so you're less and less distracted. The virtue of work, particularly work that is interesting, valuable, purposeful, meaningful, is that it helps when we get into, and we should talk about the flow state, I guess, but I'll let others ask questions. But it allows us to be totally present to one thing and the mind to be structured by that thing. That's different to distraction. You might say it's like purposeful distraction in that work for just about everyone is a very helpful thing because, and Freud said the same thing, that work structures the mind. And it's very, very hard for most people when they stop working. right? And they don't know what to do with their mind. Their mind is not necessarily strong in that mindful sense, right? But we knowing that work is structuring, it, things like Sukha are very good ways of determining how we're going to structure our attention and how we're going to structure our mind. Now, instead of the accident, which by and large is not very good for the nature of our mind, which evolved for different purposes than modern work. That was a bit rambling, I know, but you know, you get what you get. Who else?
I could jump in here. I thought the anecdote, I think it was he was talking about how he was interviewing one of his members or asking one of his members about their experience with the app. And that person said, I have two types of days. I have like what was it, like the day that seems to drag on forever, and then the day that I'm in the backyard playing with my kids and that stuck out at me partly because it doesn't match my experience at all. If I'm comparing a productive versus an unproductive day, it's not that the productive, more heavy flow state day ends earlier. It doesn't. In fact, if anything, actually, the unproductive day ends earlier because I'm just like, I'm not getting anywhere here, and I'll move myself out. But at the very least, it's not the opposite. And one of the things that it kind of led me down a sort of reflection spiral on is that in my process around this, I found that I was getting to a point where I was almost overly focused on productivity and the nature of, okay, I got a lot of stuff to do. How am I gonna optimize everything in order to get through this long list? And yes, okay, what are the three things that are on that list that I'm going to do today? But even still, it's part of this like larger giant elephant to try to eat, right? And acknowledging I'm not, you do that one bite at a time is the saying, right? But what I found is that like that productivity wasn't necessarily increasing my overall life happiness or satisfaction. But what did is like the shift that I made was actually removing the sense of expectation and requirement on finding productivity. And so I've actually removed almost all of these sort of structures meant to enable me to find that and just like kind of gone a bit more rhythmic about it. And I would say that I'm not less, I'm certainly not less productive by any stretch of the imagination. And I feel like it's more satisfying because I'm not doing it to achieve this productivity goal. And so this is probably all looping back around like maybe a false sense of what that productivity is meant to achieve and what that immersion in work is meant to achieve. But actually, so it was just interesting as I thought about it. I was like, actually, I've kind of had a kind of a different experience here where I'm kind of removing these things, these catalysts that are meant to organize and structure my day into a way that has actually felt more beneficial in a enjoyment of work and balance perspective.
Wow. So you never fail to. But there's a lot to talk about here. There's actually a lot. So I completely get what you're saying, and you're exactly on par with Stephen in that the goal is not productivity, right? So and of course productivity, more than satisfactory or even excellent productivity will be a side product. But this is a really pernicious and pervasive misconception. The world is obsessed with increasing productivity, whether you're talking about governments or you're talking about workplaces. And when people, as you know, I work in, business services type firms, law firms, etc. And, when these really high performing, highly productive people, hit their targets, get a bonus, the organisation then puts a 15% increase on their target for next year. And, it can't go on like that forever, right? And but people's identity, when you have those sorts of incentive structures in place, people's identity then gets tied into an ever increasing productivity. And if I'm not increasing productivity, so that's terrible in some sort of way, right? And so, I mean, but you don't have to be working inside a law firm or a corporation to be subject to this cultural myth, right? In fact, the backstory to Sukha, that Stephen told was exactly this issue of working in many fields where there's this kind of obsession about productivity, and look at him, right? Like, it's not like he's been unproductive, right? Like, a really interesting backstory and career, but he knew something was missing, and that's where it comes back into your story, I think, Chris. It's just like, hang on a sec. Now, I see what you're saying about the 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock thing, and I relate to it too. Like, if I get into flow, I want to keep going, and I think that's fair enough. And we'll see if we can reconcile the two things. Definitely, what he's aiming at is the person who is distracted all day and stuffs around and hits 6 o'clock, and they still haven't got the damn things done, and they're having to do it at night, and it's interrupting their family life or their own happiness, right? You, my friend, have the wisdom to go, fuck it. See, I used the F word again, Terry. To say, I'm not being productive today, I'll stop. But most people don't do that.
Yeah.
Or they can't do it, because they've got metrics for work, or there's I think you probably have a little bit more discretion about what you get done by when. But the danger, and I think you slipped into it, is just trying to optimize productivity almost for its own sake.
Yeah.
And, Cal Newport's, by now famous book, Deep Work, is a kind of frontal assault on that type of philosophy, saying we don't want to be doing more, we just want to be going deeper into fewer things. So the idea of, and of course, Stephen Covey spoke about this many years ago, about what's urgent and important, and we spend far too much time on stuff that's urgent but not important, and it's not satisfying, right? So I think his message is still going to hold for people who will recognise themselves in that 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock issue. But I'm with you as well, that if I enter flow, I want to take advantage of it. I don't want to stop the flow. And I don't know what's your experience of it like. Mine is that when I enter flow, it's not as tiring as trying to get into flow.
Right. And honestly, for me also, I get the 25-5 kind of 20-minute, 5-minute break thing, but in that I can go for hours without interruption.
Yes. And that's a really good point, because I was thinking about that as well. When I interviewed fiction writers for my PhD, I was talking about with their work practices, and that state, of course, is like when the writing is really clicking, It's not like that a lot of the time for them, right? And so I'd imagine they would, and they do, in fact, in their various different ways, have the 20-minute, 5-minute, 20-minute, 5-minute, but not when it's really cooking, right? They want to take the opportunity for that, right? But most of our work, most of the time, is not necessarily, in that full flow state.
Right.
I guess it's relative. What do you guys think? It's sort of like, because I can't imagine if using Sukha, you're just going to be in flow all day, in the sense we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that would be helpful for me.
No.
Either.
No. So I wonder if it's also relative flow.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, we were talking about with Karen, less distracted, but not in that super, time disappears, self disappears, self-consciousness disappears, and we're absorbed completely. That kind of flow. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's relative and it depends on the circumstance because
Mm-hmm.
it depends on what you're working on. And when you do get into that flow, like there's no way I want to step away from it because if I do step away from it, then the distraction is going to get me completely out of that flow. But I think in the sense of like building healthy habits on, the regular work day that I've got my task list or whatever it is I'm working on, that isn't necessarily deep flow that yes, those breaks you have to integrate those healthy habits as in creating a routine, I think is important.
It's interesting, isn't it? A couple of thoughts. One in the deep workbook, one of the strategies that Cal Newport suggests is time blocking, and I hope I've got this right, but he said, ultimately most people, if not all people, can't do more than 4 hours of deep work in a day. And he suggests that people start with 1 or even a half hour, right? And he's not saying you do nothing the rest of the day, but you're reserving this space for the deep work, and he suggests that you do all the preparation for that. You do gather the materials. You maybe for the days leading up, you're jotting notes about what you're going to do in that block of time. Let's say it's a 2-hour block or a 3-hour block, so you're not just hitting it cold, right? And so that's the really deep work, and then I guess you have all the other work, right? The other thing is, like, even with if you go on a silent meditation retreat, they don't make you sit, on the meditation cushion or on the stool. They don't make you do anything, but you know what I'm saying? You don't sit for 12, 15 hours on your ass. You alternate with usually sitting and walking meditations, as well as some meals, of course. And so I think it's similar to that too. It's not good just to be sitting, even in the flow state, Chris. If you're in that for 8 hours, I think that would get problematic after a while, right? But in fact, you don't need to be. Yeah. I think that's right. I've known really highly productive people, and they can get more done in 2 hours than I can get done in 8, because of that focus. It's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Fascinating.
But I'm glad to hear of what you've figured out, your insights, the development there in how you work. It's terrific.
Well, let's see. Maybe in a year I come back and I'm like, I had to bring all those structures back. Let's see.
I don't think so. Because it's understanding what's happening. That's the key. You've stepped outside it and looked at it and gone, oh, I see what was going on there. I was making productivity a goal in itself. And actually, that's not the goal. Happiness is the goal.
Happiness is the goal.
Yeah. And that's, again, where Sukha comes in. That's that's the goal here. And it turns out, though, that being really productive on highly meaningful tasks tends to make us happy. Yeah. Colleen, what is going on in that mind of yours?
Now, I'm not frozen for you guys, am I? Because I'm
You
frozen.
might be, yes.
Okay.
I think you are, but your voice is not frozen.
I have to say that I listened to this, I watched this on a day where the flow was not happening. So I was a little like, oh, I'd like to be
Yep.
in a better flow, but I think it's really personal. I think you just have to find what works for you. And yeah, I feel like the older I get, sometimes the harder it is, and maybe the more sensitive I am to being overstimulated or over,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, over managing too much. And I think it's hard doing what we do because you just are managing a lot and personalities and all kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just kind of took a breath and thought, okay, well, you do have to break it down and do what's best for you day to day, really. I'm gonna have good days and bad days, but
I think that's right. There's a couple of interesting things that come out of what you're saying. One is by, you know, again, I think it's like Chris's thing about not making productivity the god. That you know, you go easy on yourself. Not every day is going to be super productive. You're going to have days where you get a lot done, and other days where you're just not in the zone. I think that's normal. There could be an element of aging in it, Colleen.
well, with the aging, the other thing that I thought about was, my son, my 16-year-old son, and I really think that when he freezes, when I know he has too much homework and too much this and that,
Yeah, yeah,
he does nothing, and you just think, yeah, you just have to break it down and just do one thing and
yeah,
then take a break. And so it's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I haven't. I meant to do it and I haven't done it. I haven't sat down and and become a member and use Sukha. I'm not at all. I'm not at all opposed to doing that. I think it actually would be a good idea. But my sense of it, Colleen, is that you then design it around you. So it's not. Well, there's two things there. One is I think the whole design of it, the website, the app, the AI, is based on pretty solid stuff, right?
Mhm.
The research around flow. There's plenty of the Cal Newports, Stephen Covey's, all the stuff that's pretty solid. It's common sense in many ways, but then, as you say, you've got to work it in a way that suits you and suits your role, suits perhaps our age, and so I think that's the thing is that it's you program it, you tailor it, you tell it what your priorities are, and it just sort of keeps you on track
Yeah.
with gentle reminders. Apparently, as he said it to me, it doesn't rouse on you,
And
you idiot.
yeah, it made me think of TMI, transcendental meditation as well, because it's kind of that same, there's a mantra or it's about finding that flow and not trying to shut down your brain or quiet your
No,
mind. It's just about finding that.
yes, yes, but I think there's two things here in this conversation. And one is this kindness to self. It's like you can't always be this productivity machine. But this, I made mention of this term acedia, and which is a kind of pervasive restlessness or distractedness that's so characteristic of our time. And I think that's where something like Sukha is really timely. because my sense of people is that they're very distracted and distractible, and increasingly distractible. You might remember in the conversation we talked about, alleged multitasking, and the fact that when people practice multitasking, they become more distractible. So I think we can hold both these things. Yes, there's individual differences and we need to take care of ourselves, but also to recognise we're under systemic pressures to be distracted. And one of those pressures is this constant refrain about ever escalating productivity. All right. And I was thinking about this the other day, actually, because, it's like overwhelming how much stuff we could be reading, whether you're talking about social media, whether you're talking about Substack, whether you're talking about books. Like the amount of content directed at us is astronomical. And of course, the trick is to try to find the diamonds in the rough, the good stuff and not all the dross. But even with that, there's no way you could read even the tiniest fraction of all the wonderful stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just got me thinking about it. This is like a subset of high productivity, because I feel like I've literally got a pile of books, 20 books high, that are every day accuse me of not reading them.
Yeah, you need to keep the room empty of books, like
It's
like they talked about. Yeah.
but in the past I probably would have read them because I wasn't reading Reddits and Substacks and am I splashing around in the
Doctor like Chris? I'm actually.
Oh, you've got to go. Oh, of course, time is gone.
But yes, I also have a stack of books that looks at me very
accusingly.
Yes.
All right. So
I have to run. I'm sorry.
Terry, you run, and I'll wrap up. So, all in all, here, folks, I really recommend this site to people, at least to check it out.
Yeah.
And it's cheap. It's not like it's very expensive. Because I think that, I feel the need for some external help in just keeping me to what I want to do, right? And the trick, I think, as our conversation with Chris, is to not try to set the bar too high for self, right? Set the goals to be really meaningful, but the actual goal should be satisfaction and Sukha. So I really think he's onto something. All right, my friends. Terry has indicated to us our time has flown very quickly. So I won't also keep you any longer. But as always, thank you so much for your thoughts and your insights.
Thank you.
And we'll catch up soon. I'm not sure what we're talking about next time, but we'll talk about something. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you like the podcast and want to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. There you'll find links to my various social media posts, a newsletter, and lots more. And share the podcast with people you like so they can like it too. And a little more cello and guitar from the wonderful duo Desire and Date.